League of Josh podcast is fortunate enough to be powered by Andrew's Book Company's used books. ABC Books is located underneath the Superstore at 910 Columbia Street West, Kamloops, British Columbia. Filled with an amazing range of quality books, it is also filled with an amazing range of quality people. It's the only place I'll go to buy and sell my books. And also I'll get amazing recommendations from the employees that work there. Go check out ABC Books. Our second sponsor is Bubble Tea Gardens, located next door to ABC Books underneath the Superstore at 910 Columbia Street West, Kamloops, British Columbia. Bubble Tea Garden is close to the university, insanely cheap for students, and easily the best authentic Chinese food in town. Above all, it is filled with amazing people. Owner Teresa is an amazing, generous woman who glows with kindness and will waste no time in telling you to sit down. Go check out Bubble Tea Garden. Hello, friends. Thanks for tuning in to the League of Josh podcast. For those of you who tuned into the Drew episode, I tell a story of hobbling after a girl to ask her for coffee. I managed to get a hold of her for an episode of the podcast without having to drag my lifeless leg across a field. Akayla is an unbelievably cool human being, as is her story. I'll leave it at that. Enjoy. What do you think the biggest stigma in mental health is right now? Yeah, fucking big, broad question that could be answered a million different ways.
So many different ways.
Yeah.
I don't know about the biggest.
Okay, I'll switch that up.
But there's one that I've been noticing that comes up.
Yeah?
Quite
Okay,
a
let's do
bit
it.
recently. So one thing that I've been noticing coming up within mental health is discussions about it's discussing mental health issues if you don't have a mental health issue, which has been coming up recently as far as self-diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Which has been really interesting because there's a lot of stigma around everything related to mental health. But one thing that I've been noticing is, like, there's people taking these polar opposite sides of, like, I don't know how to explain what I'm saying.
You can take your time with it.
All right. There's a lot of people that don't have access to resources, like a doctor.
Right.
Or just mental health resources in general, and they don't necessarily have access to someone who can provide a diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And one thing I've been noticing, especially online, is people getting attacked for using words like depression and anxiety, and people just attacking them and being like, where's your proof?
Right.
And I think that's really interesting. Mm-hmm. Because in a sense, it kind of like shuts down a lot of the conversations that start happening. And that's kind of scary, I think, for a lot of people. But, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing I've noticed is, like, a trend recently that's come up probably in the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not entirely sure where that comes from. And I get both sides of it because there's people, like, definitely there's terms being overused and generalized and used inappropriately. But there's also another side to people sort of shutting down conversations based on how they view what does and does not qualify someone.
Okay, right. Yeah, totally. It's kind of like when everyone was in elementary and high school and they were like, I love this person, and then like someone like a year older would be like, you don't love them, get out of here.
Yes.
Where, yeah, I know, I totally understand that. And that's like when it comes into like the subjective view of like, someone's like, oh, like, I feel pretty sad right now, like I feel depressed, or like I feel anxious, and then people are like, oh, that doesn't exist, like anxiety doesn't exist, depression doesn't exist, and it's like, no, you just haven't like felt what this person's feeling. Yeah. Everyone is so different in terms of like how their mind processes things, like the physical morphology of their brain is so different, like from person to person. Like it like doing more and more research into like really intricate like mental health problems, like schizophrenic disorders and like Parkinson's stuff. It's like these people just like regulate dopamine in such a different way. They're like, who am I to say that someone else can't feel that like more often than someone else? So like someone's like, oh, you're always depressed, you're always anxious, you're always sad. Like that's how people are sometimes. That's how, and the more that you like fight that, and the more that you push that back, you're like, no, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not. The more that it gets a lot tougher to kind of like come out with that and be like, no, I am this way. I would like help and people, and then it becomes stigmatized where it's like, oh, I just like don't want to tell people anymore because then people are going to tell me that I'm not and that I'm, and then you start to feel crazy. That's one big thing is like people start to feel like insane, crazy because
There
people
must
keep
be
on
something wrong with them.
exactly, yeah,
Something out of place.
yeah, totally. Like your mind works a little bit differently, and some people function at much higher dopamine and don't get anxiety and don't get like depression or anything, and they're just like don't. It's really difficult if you haven't experienced those things as well, because then you're like, oh no, those are just like made up terms to like make an excuse for you being sad, as opposed to like, no, these are like things that people experience and understanding. You might never experience those things, but they exist. I might never experience being colorblind, but it's not like I'm going to go to my roommate Sam and be like, hey, you're not colorblind, idiot. That doesn't exist.
I've never experienced it, therefore it can't actually be real.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I think that's like totally like the point you're on is like creating those like stigmas of like, oh, like you experience this too much, so it can't be real. You must be making this up. And yeah, there's like a lot of kind of like a lot of people trying to call other people out on their bullshit when they really like just can't experience the human mind of someone else.
Yeah.
It's like trying to experience someone else's memories through you, just like me telling you of a situation that I've been through and you being like, yeah, I remember how I felt through that. Like, no, you'll never be able to say like, yeah, I felt warm that day that we went to the beach, and like I like tell you about a sunset or something, and you can't be like, yeah, it was beautiful, it was amazing. Like you'll never experience like the subjective feeling of how I actually felt during that. Just in the same way, if you're feeling depression or anxiety, like nobody else can feel that for you. And it varies on levels. Like some people get super depressed and super anxious, and I'll never be able to feel that. I'll never be able to feel what other people feel. And sometimes it's debilitating. I know people that like can't leave their homes because they just get super depressed, super anxious.
Absolutely.
And in no way can I say to those people, no, you don't experience that. That doesn't exist. Because to me, that doesn't exist. I've never experienced like crazy. I mean, like actually, when I was like quite young, I would sleep for like 16 hours a day.
Impressive.
It
really.
was, yeah. I think I attribute that to my insane growth spurt is that I just slept all day, every day. Yeah, like I'd get home from school at like 3:30, and I would sleep until 8, go and eat dinner until like 9, hang with my family a little bit, and then go back to sleep until 7, 8.
You know, like maybe that's why I'm so short then, because I had horrible insomnia for like most of my youth.
How do you, yeah, so insomnia is something that I find really, really, I'd like to say cool, because I think like, just like, like the mind is like a really cool thing to me, but like, how do you experience that, and how do you deal with it? Well, I mean, I'm like obviously super ignorant to insomnia because my like...
Because you could sleep for 16 hours a day.
Yeah, my insomnia episodes are like after something really, really traumatic happens to me, I'll just end up like laying in bed for... And like anytime something like really traumatic happens to me, I typically don't dream for like a week or two.
Really?
Yeah, I typically have dreams of the traumatic event.
Yeah.
Like the people that are involved in it, like I'll dream of them, and then I'll wake up and it's this really weird sensation where like they're with you and they're in your mind, and then you wake up and then life kind of goes from concrete to cement, where you're like, you turn over and you're like expecting to see them, or you're expecting to open your phone to a text or a call, and you're like, oh shit, like they're not here anymore, and they're never going to be here again.
Yeah.
So after about a week of those dreams, then I go into this like rebound of like, I don't dream for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, until I kind of figure out to get over it. I've gone like months without dreaming.
That's actually...
At least remembering dreams. I mean, I'm sure everyone does go through your REM cycles, but like I go through stages after traumatic events where I just like won't remember
Your brain
a dream.
will intentionally stay asleep until it's out of REM.
Yeah,
basically.
like I feel like I'm like suppressing dreams until the point where I'm like okay to dream again and not dream of like specific people or situations.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. I don't know.
No, that's interesting because I had an incident over the summer that was pretty massively traumatic, and I ended up in the hospital. And I don't think I had a single dream until maybe the 5th or 6th week that I was in the hospital.
Right.
And then I've had like pretty recurrent like PTSD dreams since.
Yeah.
But there was a good like 4 or 5 weeks at least that I was sleeping. I knew I was sleeping, but I didn't remember any dreams. It was like I would close my eyes and then they would open again in the morning.
It's pretty bonkers, hey? It's a
Yeah.
really disconcerting feeling, especially
Yeah.
when you go from like, I feel like kind of the happier you are, the more you dream. Were you on any SSRIs or anything?
I think they had just restarted them, yeah.
Yeah. That can affect your dream cycle.
Yeah.
A friend of mine is just getting off of his SSRIs, and he dreamt for the first time in 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was probably 2 months prior to this incident that I had started taking them again. So, it was sort of the earlier stages, but I had still been dreaming up until that point, from what I remember, and, like, weird dreams, too. So I had some, like, weird, vivid dreams in the beginning, but then, nothing.
I find, like, the first bit after, like, said traumatic events, it'll be, like, the craziest, vivid, most lucid dreams, and then it'll just hit this point where I'm like, I don't want to dream anymore.
Yeah.
Just because, like, I don't want to, like, relive this shit over and over again. So it's, like, almost better, but then, like, I feel like after I'm done, like, coping a little bit more, then I hit this point where I'm like, the first thing I dream, kind of, I'm like, okay, like, it must be a little bit better now.
Things must be starting to sort themselves out.
Yeah,
Out there.
I'm super into, like, Freud and how he talks about, like, the, like, dreams of your subconscious trying to, like, come forth and, like, show you different things. And I'm like, okay, like, that must have some merit to it. I think the dreams are for, like, both memory and also...
Processing.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
and so, like, I'm, like, super into that now, being, like, I can, like, lucid dream sometimes. And
Wow.
so whenever that happens, I'm like, cool, okay, like, time to work through my shit. And then sometimes it gets, like, really bad, and I'm like, okay, like, please wake up.
Yeah, maybe no more. I think I need a break from this.
Yeah, no, totally.
You know, it's interesting because the one thing that didn't go away related to dreaming for me, even during this 4 or 5 week period, was, you know, when you're first falling asleep and sometimes you wake up because it feels like you're falling.
Yeah.
Like you'll sort of like start to go into a dream, but it's like you fall off of something.
Yeah.
And it wakes you up. That never went away.
Really?
That increased almost tenfold.
Really?
Yeah, and it hasn't gone away. It's one of those things that I have those dreams probably. I went from having them like, you know, maybe once a month, once every few months, to like I probably get them 3 or 4 times a week now.
Yeah.
And at first it was like usually a couple of times a night. So, yeah.
Dang.
Yeah. Just as I was starting to fall asleep, I would wake straight back up. But then nothing. No dreams after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I experienced that, like, actually, like, I think 2 nights ago, I was, like, to lucid dream, I'll just, like, lay in my bed, like, flat and just, like, focus on my breath. And then after, like, 20 minutes, you'll typically, like, fall asleep, but I laid in bed. And I'd been having a few, like, traumatic dreams the night, like the nights prior, and I ended up, like, not sleeping, really. I think I slept for, like, 2 hours or something. But I'm just, like, laying in bed and just, like, you basically, to, like, lucid dream, you just, like, lay in bed and just don't move. Like, your body does things to, like, try to make you move to make sure it's awake. So, like, your first reaction is, like, roll over.
Yeah.
And then after you kind of break through that, it's, like, just itch something. Like, you're kind of, like, going to more micro scales. And so it goes from, like, roll over, and then if you don't roll over for a while, then you're, like, you get really, really itchy.
Yeah.
And I have, like, pretty, not, like, bad psoriasis, but, like, I have, like, really dry skin. And I'm, like, holy shit, this is, like, the itchiest I've ever been.
I get eczema, and I have the exact same thing.
Oh,
It's
my
the
God.
itching that gets to me every time.
Yeah.
I always break.
Yeah. And it was, like, I, like, broke through both of them, and then I ended up laying there for, like 3 hours. just like staring at my roof like, fuck, please God. Oh my God, just go, like, fall asleep, please. And then at this point where I was just like, just felt like I was falling, and I was like, oh, like I like kind of got up and I was like, whoa, what just happened? Like, I don't really have those often, but when I do, I'm like, what the
Yeah.
fuck was that? Like, holy, that was random.
Someone told me once that it was your body trying to fall asleep too quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that's true or not.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. So it's a literal falling sensation.
That'd be cool to fall asleep quickly.
Yeah. I usually don't. Insomnia.
Yeah.
So
So how often do you sleep, and how much do you sleep per sleep?
a lot more than I used to. There was
Yeah.
a good, I'd say when it was at its worst, I was probably 12 years old. It was right after I moved to Kamloops the very first time that I moved here.
Right.
And for probably all of that year, I would get, at worst, no sleep. And most nights, I would usually get like somewhere between like 20 minutes and 2 hours. And like on a really good night, I might get like up to 4 hours. And then probably every like 2 to 3 weeks, there would be a weekend where I would sleep for probably 80% of the entire weekend. And I would just like maybe get up to like eat a meal.
Yeah.
And that was about it. And it would happen probably, yeah, maybe like once, sometimes twice a month, where I would just like sleep through a full like probably like 40 hours with like small wake up breaks.
Dang.
Yeah.
So what do you think the difference is, both like, I mean, like solely like psychologically, mentally, from obviously that's like a pretty huge move. You're moving
Yeah.
cities, you're like a young child, your brain is obviously quite malleable. That's like a huge, like you'd be just hitting puberty at that point, kind of.
Yeah, and on top of that, I am on the autism spectrum, so
Right.
change in general for me was just hugely traumatic. Change of any kind really tended to be a big trigger point for me. So then moving from a small town, because I grew up on Bowen Island, so it was this tiny community that I had known my whole life, and that was it. That was my family. I didn't really see my parents much growing up because they both worked, and so all of my ties were within the community.
Yeah.
So then to sort of be in that really awful sort of transitional stage of life already, and then to kind of be uprooted and put in this city where I didn't know anyone, it was a huge... I don't even have a word for it.
Yeah. No, you're getting thrown into like a completely new situation with,
Yeah.
as like a kid, like.
Yeah, with no... I didn't really feel like I had that much of a relationship with my parents at that point because they weren't necessarily the people who raised me.
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly I was with my parents all the time. My mom wasn't working when we first moved here, so she was just there for the first time that I could really remember. She was there all the time.
Right.
In this house. And no one else that I really knew. So yeah, it was traumatic, to say the least.
Yeah. And how was that, having your mom around a little bit more?
It was really hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard for me to accept her being there suddenly, because it kind of felt like every time that I had ever needed her before that point, she had never been there.
Mm-hmm.
And she was there occasionally, but she wasn't someone I felt I could rely on or reach out to in any way because we didn't really have... She wasn't that person. That person was my friend or my friend's parents.
Right.
And they were all back home. And I think my mom tried, and I think she kind of tried to make up for it in a lot of ways, but at that point, it's also that like awful stage of like being 12 years old and going through puberty and wanting to push your parents away to begin with.
Yeah.
And then when you don't really have that relationship with them, I think there was just a lot of silence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of seeking your individuality and...
Mm-hmm. Or you're supposed to be, but that's all I had ever known.
Yeah.
So it was harder to navigate. It was like suddenly she... I felt this actually more when I got older. As I've grown up and gotten a lot older, and as an adult, even this past year with this other traumatic experience I went through, suddenly my mom was trying to reach out to me and be helpful, and she was trying to be supportive. And for me, I found that really difficult because, and part of it was like this anger that I had with her because she wasn't there when I needed her as a kid a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't know how to accept help as an adult because she wasn't the person I knew how to talk to. And there was a little bit of that bitterness of like, where were you?
Yeah.
Why are you here now?
Yeah.
Now I don't necessarily need you the same way. Like, I needed you then, so where were you?
Right.
So I don't know. It's always different, and I've always had a lot of respect for my mom. She's a very tough lady. She's been through hell, to say the least. So I've always had a lot of respect for her, and I do love her. She's my mom. I love her, and we do have a really good relationship now in most areas. But even, like, after working on that relationship for probably the past 5 years, I've put a lot of work into that. Even this past year, it still gets hard when things come up. So I don't know. I like to think that that gets easier. It's getting a little bit easier.
I think it does. I think I was like really similar as a kid. I never really had, like, I lived with my dad from when I was probably like 12 to 18, like 11 to 18, kind of in that range. I really talked to my mom during that time. Actually, like, didn't talk to my mom at all. And I was like always just like, I just hit this wall, like this weird level where I was just like a crazy stoic, and I just like wouldn't talk about emotions or anything. And I was like a pretty like joyful kid. I mean, I'd get like sad sometimes and stuff, but I was always like at relatively the same level, whether I was like sad, depressed, anxious, happy. I was always like at the same level in public. And it was like really difficult to talk about feelings with anyone because I never, like, my dad and I were never like at that level really where we could like talk about stuff. And even now, like a few weeks ago, we FaceTimed and he was like, "Hey, what's wrong?" And I'm like, "No, nothing." He was like, "No, like, come on, buddy, what's wrong?" And I'm like, "No, like, seriously, nothing." And he was like, "Oh, come on, like, you got to start like opening up more." And I'm like, I'm like a hugely open human being now. Like, I understand that I never was before, and I never really had anyone to talk to. I never really had anyone there for me, like a shoulder to cry on or anything. I had to deal with a lot of my stuff alone, and now I'm like open to a fault where I'm like,
Yep.
I'm like, someone's like, "Hey man, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm pretty shitty." And they're like,
Yep.
"Oh, that's not a response I get often." I'm like, "Yeah, I just don't want to lie to you or lie to me. If I'm shitty, I'll tell you I'm shitty. If I'm good, I'm tell you I'm good. But like, I just don't want to." And he was like, "Yeah, like, what's wrong?" I'm like, "Nothing." He's like, "You're so closed off. Like, you gotta wear your heart on your sleeve sometimes." I'm like, I do. You don't even understand how much I do. Like, to a fault. I make people uncomfortable with how open I am now.
Oh, I understand that so much, so.
Cause I think it's way better to be that way. I think it's way better to be open and like, I guess like, I feel like you weed people out really easily.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there are people who are just like constantly like, "Yeah, good, life is awesome." And then I like see people at the gym, they're like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Pretty shitty today." And they're like, "Oh, what's going on?" I'm like, "Yeah, all this shit. Like, I can barely walk. Like all this random stuff." And like, I'll kind of like go on a spiel. And I'm like a pretty like optimistic nihilist. And I'm like,
Yep.
We're all just going to die one day. So like, why not do like whatever makes you happy? Just like live it, like whatever. And they're like, "Oh man, that's so sad." I'm like, "No, like
I don't
that makes
feel
me
sad
happy."
about it.
I'm like, "Yeah, like I'm a pretty joyful human being now, just in the sense of like, I can be open with anyone, and there's not too much stuff that I'm like closed off about. There's not a lot of stuff that I'm like, oh, like I don't want to talk about that because it makes me feel sad. I feel like if I talk about something that makes me feel sad, that's like good for me.
Yeah.
There are things that I have like even in my
Things that
room.
you need to process.
Yeah, exactly.
Every emotion is just an emotion.
Yeah, totally. Fear is just a friend who's misunderstood.
Exactly.
John Mayer. Been super into Continuum lately.
Perfect.
God, he's so good. What
Very
a handsome, beautiful voiced fella.
Very true.
But yeah, like I have stuff in my room even that like makes me quite sad to look at, but I'm like, one day it's not gonna make me sad.
Yeah.
And that's like when I'll be like more happy and joyful.
And that's a part of it, is when you see those things and you feel that emotion, you get to process it. You're working through it. You're feeling it. And when you're not actually accessing that emotion, when you're not feeling it towards that situation, whatever it is, it doesn't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. There is no working through it. You're not processing it. It just starts to builds.
Yeah, it culminates like in your subconscious, and then one day you have this huge blow up that you're like, I'm a happy person. I don't know why I'm so sad.
Yeah, or it leads to just depression.
Yeah,
anxiety. Totally. Those are some of those things that sort of started off, I think, a lot of the time. Those things that you want to just shove down that started off as normal, everyday emotions. Suddenly, once you start suppressing them, they build.
I think that's what depression, especially depression. I think anxiety is a little bit more of a different beast. Mm-hmm. I think it's a lot about like worrying about the future and like worrying about who you are as a human being and like what you can accomplish. But I think depression's like a lot about worrying about the past and like really taking on that stuff and being like, okay, I don't know like what's going on. I don't know what's happened in the past, and like allowing all that stuff to affect you. But I think that like slowly builds up, and then I think that when it finally hits, it's like this moment when your brain's like, even if your life's going great, you can go into depression because it's like,
oh, absolutely.
It's like, hey, you've got a lot of shit to work through. Let's start to work through it now. And that's your body being like, you need to kind of go from a caterpillar to a cocoon to become a butterfly.
Well, and that kind of reminds me of what we were talking about earlier. One thing I was thinking was just with the way the conversation started about people's views, but I've noticed people feel like you need to have a reason to feel anxious or to feel depressed or to have those conditions in general. But again, that comes back to that like forcing you to try and validate and justify it. Mm-hmm. And that sort of goes into it as well. It's like, well, you can't be depressed because you have a good life.
Yeah.
Because you're this and that. You should be happy.
That becomes like a really like fucked up thing of how we look into other people's lives, of being like,
fucked up to say the least.
Totally. You're like, oh no, this person's like, you're like, this is a gorgeous human being that's smart and funny and has a lot of friends. There's no reason they should be depressed. Where in reality, it's like there's so many things underlying that like slowly feed into that. And hearing that is like the worst thing in the world.
Oh,
hearing that you should be okay, hearing like it's fine, just like be better, like you're fine, don't worry about it. That hurts a lot more than like it's okay. It's okay to not be okay. That is so much better to hear than like you're fine, man. Just like you're good. Just keep doing you. Like you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. You have all these so things that I don't have. Exactly. Yeah, it's like yes, I am aware that there are all these amazing things in my life, but you can't change your mind. You can't like you can't just be like, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's right. I am this, I am that. Those things help, but you really have to like dig into like why you're feeling this way, because there's a reason. There like has to be a reason for it, whether you're lacking in certain aspects of like friends, family, different personality aspects, like
neurotransmitters.
Yeah, totally. Oh my god, dude, Montoya. What a homie.
Oh, and that's just it. Like sometimes there really is no reason for it other than some brains don't produce enough of the right chemicals.
Yeah.
Sometimes that is the answer.
Totally. And your brain changes day to day. Like one day there can just be like a click, just a snap, and you're like,
yeah.
Okay. Now I don't feel good.
Yep.
That's totally happened in the past. Where like I'll be like, good, good, good. Even going like good days, bad days, where you'll have something traumatic happen, you'll have like bad day, bad day, bad day. And then like a month later you'll have like one good day. And then the next like 3 just bad days. And then one more good day. And then you go 2 weeks without a good day, and then finally, and it just gets like, you get a little bit better day by day. And I think that's what it comes down to, is not like artificially jumping out of it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, I understand, like, using drugs to, like, increase dopamine and, like, SSRIs and MOABs and stuff. Not MOABs, that's a bomb. Monoamine oxidase inhibitors and stuff. I think those are, like, really, really good, but at the same time, I feel like people really need to feel emotions and, like, go and see a therapist. That's, like, always my hugest thing.
I mean, the whole point of the medication is sort of to get you to a point where you can see the therapist.
Yeah.
The therapist, that's where you do all of the work.
Yeah.
That's where you actually start to get better. That's where you learn how to cope, where you learn how to process, where you learn everything.
Yeah. That's where you, like, change your brain.
The work gets done.
Yeah.
Exactly. And like he says, with neuroplasticity.
Yeah. Like,
the way that you are going to wire your brain. And, like, they have specific therapies to teach you how to do that. And it's the fact that, like, one thing I talk to a lot of people about, and one thing that my therapist talks to me a lot about, is the way that she uses the metaphor of, like, a path. Mm-hmm. So if you walk down the same path over and over and over again, it gets worn in.
Yes.
Your footsteps, they leave an impact. So you're going to be able to find that path really, really easily. It's there. It's not difficult to walk down that path because you've kicked all the rocks out of the way. There aren't any shrubs growing in the middle of it because you've walked on them.
Right.
But then when you're trying to form new thoughts, when you're trying to find a new pattern of thinking and a new way to think about something, it becomes really difficult because you don't have that nice worn path. Mm-hmm. And it's so, so easy to take that path that you've already worn in. And, like, I think that really comes into a play in a lot of different, especially mental health issues, like, where there's behavioral components. But even just general thought patterns, it's easy to take the thought pattern that you've been thinking forever, even if it's, I hate myself. Yeah. It's easy to think that because that's how you've wired your brain to think. That's how your brain is going to automatically go. So it's like having this whole, it's so much effort to then do a U-turn, come back, and take a new path that you can't actually see yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
Oh, no, 100%. The way, like, I visualize it, I use this a lot in, like, meditation when I'm, like, first getting people into meditation, when they're like, oh, I can't meditate, I can't do this. It's like, think of yourself as, like, in, like, a 5 feet tall field of snow, and you just have to, like, go through this one. You just have to pick a lane and just, like, go through it. It's going to be really hard the first time, and then it gets a little bit easier and a little bit easier until you've got walls beside you and you're just, like, in a path.
Yeah.
And it just gets slowly worn down. And I think that's, like, such a big thing in mental health, especially, like, when you first talk about something, that's the hardest shit ever.
Oh, yeah.
There have been so many times where I'm like, no, just don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. And then I'll talk to someone about it and just, like lose myself in emotion. I'm like, I'll, like, bawl for forever and, like,
of course,
just, like, cry to someone and be like, this is how I feel. This sucks. I don't want to do this. And then the next time it's a little bit easier. And the next time you tell your story, it's a little bit easier and easier and easier. And, like, then you get to the point where it's just, like, it's just another path. And then you go back and try another path. Mm-hmm. And that's, like, what really matters is, like, after you become comfortable with one thing, going back and being like, okay, what's something else? Like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table kind of have that when they go out and seek for the Holy Grail. They all leave the castle. They have no idea where the Holy Grail is.
Yeah.
They all go and they're like, all right, we're going to find this motherfucker. And then, so they all go out, they leave the castle, and there's forest around them all, like, everywhere. And they all, each knight goes to the part of the forest that looks the darkest to them. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, right? I took that from Jordan Peterson. I'm also, like, the most unoriginal human being alive. I just, like, take things from other people.
It's working for you.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah. I feel like that's, like, what everyone is, and people are like, afraid to be like kind of like a phony, but like I'm like so content with being a phony. I just take like different parts of people's lives that I like really like that they do, and I'm like, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna use that story. I'm gonna use this story, different archetypes and stuff. Like take things from different books. I'm like, I'm gonna mold myself into this like person that I like everything about other people.
No, I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah, no. So like, that's like one thing is like, try to do the thing that seems the hardest to you, and once you do that thing, once you go to the darkest part of the forest to you, like your subjective darkest part of the forest, then going to any other part of the forest is like
a little less intimidating.
Yeah, it's
just
like
a little bit.
Yeah, and like you can do it the opposite way, 100%. Go to the lightest part, and then a little bit darker, and then a little bit darker, and do things progressively. You don't necessarily have to do things like top down. You can do things bottom up. You can do things the easiest, and then a little bit harder. Or you can do things like, I'm gonna go do this workout and fucking kill myself. And then I'll do a little bit of an easier workout, and that'll be way better.
It'll feel like nothing.
Yeah, totally. That's like, and like in terms of mental health, that's like such a big thing too. Like maybe disclose a little bit more about myself today.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more. Or it's like, I really like the path of like, I'm just gonna throw myself out there, and a lot of people aren't gonna like it.
Yeah.
Some people are, and those people that are, those are the people that I love. Those are like the greatest people in the world.
Those are the people you keep around.
Exactly.
Those are the ones that become an integral part of your life.
Yeah.
Like, I met my best friend on a bus in Vancouver.
City bus or like a Greyhound?
Just a city bus.
Nice.
Yeah, in North Vancouver. I was on the bus one day coming home from work, and I was sitting there. I was eating out of a bag of salad. Just like, you know, those grocery store bags of salad. That's what I had bought. So I was like eating lettuce. Didn't have a fork. It was fine. So this guy looks over at me and he's like, that's weird. So then he came and talked to me. He's been one of my best friends for like 4 or 5 years now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. My one of my really good friends, his daughter's kind of going through this really weird, like clearly junior high phase. Where like everyone's starting to wear makeup and get boyfriends, and he's like, she's my little weirdo. She's like amazing, but she's just like not like into that. But that's okay. The floor's really dark. No
one will notice. It's fine.
People aren't gonna see wine stains on a dark floor. Yeah, but he's like, she's like my little weirdo and like super funny and does like all of this like weird quirky stuff, but she doesn't feel like good about that. Yeah. She wants to be part of
she feels out of place.
Yeah, exactly. But I find those people are like the greatest people ever, because
absolutely.
You go from this like when you're younger you feel like really really anxious and like self-conscious, but you're like, oh, I want to be part of the popular kids, the cool kids. Like I had like 2 friends through high school. One of my best friends now, KT, he's on the volleyball team, but like we kind of like spread apart in high school, and he hung out with different guys. I was acquaintances with like everyone. Yeah. I've always been like pretty like social in terms of like I can just kind of like chameleon into like any group that I'm like, oh, like I'll be friends with you, and like I can always find similarities with people, but it's very rarely that I'm like very very drawn to people that I'm like, all right, we're going to be fucking best friends forever.
We're best friends now.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. Yeah.
So I had like 2 super authentic, really good buddies in high school. And that was always like something weird to me that I was like, I don't like this. Like I would like more friends. You always kind of want more. Yeah. But now looking back, I'm like, that was the greatest thing ever. The fact that I had those 2 guys were like amazing. Like Bryce and Nick were like 2 of my greatest friends. And even now I go back home and I'm like, we'll just talk for 6 hours. And it feels like seconds go by. Whereas other people that I know, they don't go and hang out with their high school friends. They like, and that's a thing with like his daughters. She's like kind of freaking out about it. And I'm like, no, like embrace how weird you are. Embrace how different you are, how intricate you are. And then other people will find you. And that's something you don't really realize.
Those are your people.
Exactly. Like
the rest really don't matter.
You don't want to be a part of that group that you're like, you can't be your authentic self. You don't want to be part of the group where you're like, I'm scared to say something because it's out of the norm and I don't want to be judged by it. Mm-hmm. It's good to be with the people that are like, please be fucking weird.
Yeah.
Please be the weirdest human being that you can be, so that we can like find some middle ground, and we can be weird together, and we can grow together.
Oh yes, exactly.
As opposed to like, let's go and talk about girls and sports. Like, I want people that I'm like, hey, do you want to go talk about like social constructs for a little bit? And
Hell yes.
they're like, yeah, let's do it. Like, let's go have a few beers and talk about how weird our society is. Like, that, I find that like so much more fun than like,
yeah.
let's go try to like grab girls from the bar or something. That's something
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't like that anymore.
No.
Like, I was a first year once and like didn't really enjoy it back then. I don't really enjoy it now.
You did it because you thought you had to and you were expected to.
Yeah, I'm like,
kind of thing.
I even like kind of like, I like broke up with my long-term girlfriend because I was like,
Yeah.
I just want to like experience university. And then I was like, this doesn't make me feel good. Like, seeing random people, I'm like, this is not like a good thing for me. Like, okay.
This isn't working for me,
Yeah.
so where do I go from here?
Yeah, exactly. Now I'm like, okay, I don't need to like see random people or go to the bar to try to pick up girls or anything. Like, I would rather just have like a good conversation with someone, and if it ends there, it ends there.
Yeah.
If it gets a little bit better, cool.
Yeah.
But like, no expectations of like some like physical intimacy that I'll wake up in the morning and be like, I feel worse about myself than I did yesterday.
You don't feel good.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm a piece of shit. Fuck.
I'm the bad guy.
Yeah, no, totally. Like,
It happens.
fuck.
I think everyone's been there at least once where they're like, oh, I'm the asshole in this situation.
Totally, yeah.
Been there.
Like, oh, I'm a piece of shit.
That's okay.
That's one thing I've realized, like, everyone's kind of a piece of shit.
Yeah, everyone has done something that they're like, ooh,
Yeah.
not a good moment for me.
Even like day to day, I'm like, oh, that kind of makes me a piece of shit.
Like, oh, I was an asshole right there.
Yeah.
All right.
And I feel
Maybe it's time to apologize.
maybe it's time to grow a little bit. Yeah.
How about I don't do that again?
Yeah, no, 100%. I feel like that's like also this weird like mentality thing. There's this stigma on like being individual, being yourself, and like saying no to that kind of stuff. Like, there'll be people that are like, hey man, like, let's go to the bar and like take a girl home. Like, I'll go to the bar. I don't want to take anyone home. I just like don't enjoy that anymore.
No.
I've like experienced like real intimacy and stuff, and I'm like, I just can't go back.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Oh, absolutely.
I would I mean, I've never done like meth or anything like any crazy drugs like that, but I'm quite committed to like on my deathbed. I'm like hit me up with some heroin,
Oh God,
fentanyl,
yes.
like throw me out of a plane so I can go skydiving and
Make
just
me
like
nice and comfortable.
have an IV, and that's like how I'll go out. But like, I very fortunately and unfortunately started my love life with like seeing a girl that I was like head over heels in love with, and now anything besides that, I'm like,
Yep.
fuck,
This
is
sucks.
yeah, I'm like, this is so dumb. Like,
Why am I doing this?
I'm like, this doesn't make me feel good. The person that I'm doing it with probably doesn't feel good.
This isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't feel like we're not gonna do this ever again. It's like,
Yeah.
why do this? It's like, but now when I like do find someone like that, I'm like, I almost like, oh geez, what's the word? Not like overanalyze, but I idealize the relationship, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. This is so cool.
It's gonna be amazing forever.
Yeah, so I've been working on that a lot lately, of not idealizing relationships and kind of being more relaxed about stuff and being like, okay,
We're just gonna see where it goes.
yeah, this is just like cool as it is.
What happens.
Let's not talk about the future, please God, because that'll like make me snowball.
Yep.
But like, yeah, no, and it's kind of cool that people are getting to that state where it's like you can just like be yourself,
Yeah.
and there'll be people that are similar to you, and by being yourself, you're gonna draw in more people like that. You don't have to fit the mold.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find people appreciate it a lot more when you are authentic and when you are just yourself. And like the people who don't, like you said, like they're not the people you want in your life all the time.
Yeah.
They really aren't. Because like they're gonna find out eventually. Everyone around you is eventually going to find out how you actually are.
Yeah.
Might as well just put it out there
Yeah.
from the start. Weed out the ones from the beginning who aren't going to accept that, who aren't gonna stick around.
Yeah. No, 100%. People are going to be like, this guy's fucking weird. And then you'll never have to see those people again.
Yeah.
You'll never have to see the people that like make you feel bad about being yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like a big thing. It's like just feeling bad, feeling like crazy about being who you are is like a sad thing.
See, I have this issue where I bring out the weird in other people.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It could be good, could be bad. Hard to say.
I feel like that's a good thing. Like you feel like make people. I feel like it's not necessarily bring out the weird, but
it's like giving them permission to be weird because at least they're not going to be alone in it.
Totally inspiring authenticity. You're allowing people to be themselves. Where there's so many people that I hang out with that they're like, what the fuck? Like they're like, I'm never like this. I'm like, this is like how you are though. Like I'm just gonna be myself, so you be yourself. We don't have to agree on everything. Like let's disagree. Let's have like an argument and a discussion. And then like there's so many times like I'll succeed in arguments. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you're right.
Yeah.
I know what I'm talking about.
I was wrong.
I'm just like a crazy asshole. It's whatever. Like I'm okay with being wrong. And people are like, that's weird. That's weird.
Okay, but when you admit that you're wrong, a lot of the time, people just want to keep arguing with you.
Yeah.
Because they're like, wait, what do you mean you actually are accepting that I'm right here? Like, I'm not done. Got more to say. And you're like, yeah, but I already know you're right.
Yeah. No, totally.
You can tell me, but I'm going to agree with you.
I was studying my friend's place the other night and like all of her roommates came out and we were all like kind of talking. And there'd be points where it'd be like, we were talking about like falling in love with your phone. I think that's like highly realistic in the future is that like your phone listens to everything. Your phone knows exactly who you are and how you operate.
I'm sure there's a movie about that.
Her.
Isn't there?
Yeah, with Joaquin Phoenix.
Phoenix.
Yeah, my
Whatever
boy, he's so
happened to
good.
him?
Oh, I watched The Master, like Randy Grunman. He's like super into Joaquin Phoenix. So he's just been like dishing me out. He gives me like a flash drive every like 2 or 3 weeks of just like Joaquin Phoenix movies and like other random stuff. We watched The Wizard of Oz. Like, I don't know. We're super random. We're just like, we watched 2001 Space Odyssey. That was really cool. But we like, yeah, so we were talking about that. And like, I was like, yeah, I think it's like super plausible. And then we started to like go over it. And then at some point I was just like completely wrong in some way. Yeah. And they like brought up a few points and I was like, yeah, okay, good point. Yeah, you're right. And they're like, what else? I'm like,
that's all.
Yeah, I don't need to.
You're right.
I don't need to like argue this like arbitrary fact that like I know that I'm not. Even if I'm not right, if I'm not 100% right, I'll typically be like, I can understand your perspective.
Exactly.
Unless it's like an objective fact, like, hey, the Eagles won the Super Bowl last year and they beat the Patriots. That's something that I'll be like, hey, motherfucker, let's bing it. But like, if it's like an arbitrary thing, I'm like, and like more subjective, it's like, okay, let's agree to disagree. I love having friends that I can disagree with.
Oh yeah.
I love talking to people and having them be like, I think you're wrong. I'm like, okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I think you're wrong sometimes, and I'll tell you too.
Yep.
That's the best way to do it.
Yeah. And like a lot of that does tie into a lot of other things where like some things really are as subjective as they are, like a lot of it will come back down to like your beliefs growing up, what you value.
Yeah.
What you have been told to think, for one thing. Like that ties into a lot of what happens in our world. But I especially find whenever it comes down to values, that's always where people get the most angry, but it's also where they'll have like the most opposing views that are like so parallel to each other. And they get so stuck in these like teeny tiny details of like, really we're arguing basically the same thing with a slight variation, but we have to like fight about the tiny details. And like they'll just destroy each other first of all until they can get to the point where they're like, oh yeah, okay, I can see your perspective, but like also turns out we have the same common goal.
Man, like religion. That's like literally what religion is.
It's pretty much the entire thing.
every single religion is so similar. It's basically just like, I really, really like, I mean, I read like the Kama Sutra lately, which
Nice.
which I totally thought was going to be this crazy sex book, and then it turns out to be this like
Mostly about breathing.
not breathing, but just like Eastern philosophy on love. Like that's what Kama is. There's like Dhamma, Artha, and Kama, and there's like this fourth like enlightenment, and like Dharma is more, or sorry, Dhartha is like a spiritual enlightenment. Artha is like a materialistic enlightenment. Kama is like a love enlightenment. So when you've realized all of those things, then you kind of hit this like fourth enlightenment that you like attain enlightenment. Yeah, I totally thought it was going to be like, because I've always heard like, oh yeah, it's this like crazy sex book, and then there's like one chapter on like 8 positions that are like very common knowledge, and like I feel cheated.
A little bit cheated. A little bit.
But it was like the coolest book ever because it talked a lot about.
That ties into a lot of like, because you've talked quite a bit about like meditation and things like that. Like a lot of that ties into that, and it's that like they're very, what's the word? Really, that's just what it's talking about. It's like, think about it.
Yeah.
Think about these things.
That's like the coolest part of it is like it talks about like ways of seduction and even like how to seduce someone else's wife and how to seduce.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's nuts. But then like it always has these weird like 2-sentence disclaimers where it's like,
Maybe
we've
don't
talked
do
about
this.
this, but don't do it. I just want you to like understand.
You should do it.
Yeah.
But here's how you could do it.
Exactly. It's like understand how to, not understand, like not.
Not so that you can.
Yeah.
Just so that you would know how.
Yeah. But like the Kama Sutra talks a lot about, there's actually one part that's like, it made me feel quite sick. It was just because of like the culture I've like been raised in. It talks about how you're supposed to like seduce a woman, and it's basically like, yeah, like rub her privates and stuff, and then if she's like a desirable good girl, then she's supposed to like say no, and she's supposed to like be like no, 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 and you're basically supposed to like keep going until she like gives into the like the flame of passion.
Yeah, I can see why you would have such a big issue with that. That's horrifying.
And I kind of like, I like put it down for a little bit. Like I'll always read in like, I like always read an Old Maid. I'll just sit there for hours and just like read, and I'll go through like reading and people watching consistently. And then
Old Maid is a good place for that.
Yeah, totally. I love just like putting my book down and like having people like come up to me randomly and be like, hey, how's it going, man? I'm like, oh, I'm pretty good. And like having cool conversations. But like, it was this really, really weird feeling where I was like, okay, that is like, that's a social, cultural thing for like people who are in that culture. But for our culture, it's the opposite. Like fucking no means no. Yeah. Like, and that's something that I see should be consistent through all cultures. But the fact that that's based on like a historical book of like 1,000 chapters.
And that's just is that like even in our culture, like not that long ago, that also would have been acceptable.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
That's it's like really a recent development, and they're like, oh yeah, maybe don't do that.
Yeah, that's just becoming a thing of like, okay, this is more than like a sack of meat. This is a human being. If someone were to, if you were to say no, you would mean no. So let's not take that for granted.
This person actually matters and can think for themselves.
Yeah.
A concept.
Your like small time pleasure does not satisfy the lifelong psychological damage that you're about to instill on this human being.
Exactly.
So that really fucked me up. There was like there were a few days where I like didn't really read it, where I was like,
you needed to take a mental health break from that book.
I felt gross. I was like, I don't like what just happened. I don't like that philosophy.
No.
But back onto religion and how like parallel ideas being disagreed upon because they're 1 degree to the right as opposed to being exactly on line. I think that like there's so many religions, basically all religions preach be good to other people.
Yeah.
Love other people. The universal language is love. Everyone can speak love. That dog, where's Bentley? Oh, he's around here somewhere. But like if I love Bentley, Bentley's going to understand that. Bentley's not going to understand if I speak English to him. Just like so many other people from other languages. Like if I dance, if I sing, if I do so many loving actions with someone, they'll understand it. But but they're not going to understand English.
And that's the same with emotions. It's the same way that facial expressions, to express emotions,
yeah, absolutely,
are universal among every culture.
Yeah.
It's all the same. Like, as far as you could go to anywhere in the world and your facial expression, if you're happy, if you're sad, if you're grieving, if you're afraid, surprised, people can recognize that in your face, even if they don't understand what you're saying out loud.
Yeah. I feel like emotions are like the fuck off of language, where it's like everyone can understand like facial expressions and like how your body language portrays emotion in the exact same way that if I go to Mexico and if I tell someone to fuck off,
Yep.
they're going to know exactly what I'm saying.
Yep.
If I go anywhere in the world, I'm like, hey, wait, fuck off.
Yep.
They're like, okay, I know what this guy's talking
right.
about. Same way if I have a frown on, if I'm crying, it probably means sad.
Yeah.
And then like you can even see like happy tears. Mm-hmm. Like I've had that problem like in relationships where like I'll cry of happiness and they're like, what's wrong? I'm like, no, I'm just like really
Just
happy.
so happy right
I don't know.
now.
I don't know why I'm crying. I don't want to cry.
Yeah.
I'm really happy right now though.
Or, hey, this commercial's really cute. Now I'm crying.
That happens
Sometimes
a lot.
that happens.
Anytime I talk to a pregnant woman, they're like,
Every time.
they're like, man, I saw this commercial about dogs yesterday and just bawled.
You know what
I'm
it
like,
was from my mom?
It's beautiful.
The Royale kittens, those white fluffy kittens.
Oh,
Every time they were on
man.
screen, she would sob when she was pregnant.
Oh,
Yep.
it's a good toilet paper too.
Yeah, there you go.
Royale sponsor. Sponsor us.
Hoping for a sponsorship here.
And a shout out to our sponsors. Yeah, no, like 100%. That's hormones are something that I find like
yeah.
crazy. I think that's so cool. They're like, you can be like a different person than you are, and like sometimes it makes me like really sad because people go through like hormone deficiencies and stuff, and like an over supplementation of hormones that they're like they change people and they change personalities, and like those people think that they're crazy, but it's like, no, you're okay. You're just like who you are, and like people are gonna love you for that. Just like find the people that will understand you through that and love you through that, and like be with those people. But like, you're not crazy. You're fine. You're who you are. You're never gonna be different. So don't try to make yourself different. Don't try to fight it. Mm-hmm. Just be who you are. Like, you're an amazing human being. Just fucking love yourself.
I think that's the way it is with everything. It's all about really finding the right people who are going to support you and are going to love you, whatever is going on. Because there are some things like, there are certain things that certain people, they're not going to be able to deal with. Those aren't your people for that situation. Maybe they're an okay acquaintance.
Yeah.
But maybe they're not your core group of people.
Totally. There are people that like, when things get tough, you really realize, when things are both like really, really good and really, really bad, you realize who the people that you really want to surround yourself are.
Yeah.
Because like, the people that you want to surround yourself with are the people that are going to be there when it's really, really good. And you're like, yeah, life's amazing. And they're like, yeah, I'm here for you.
They're going to celebrate with you.
And then when it's really bad. Yeah, exactly. And then when it's really bad, it's like, I'm here for you. Let's figure this out. Let's do this. Let's talk. Let's like cry on my shoulder. Those are the people that you're like, yeah, I want to be with you always.
I think one thing that I didn't really truly understand the value of until pretty recently is like how meaningful it is to have someone just physically be there.
Yeah.
Even over the summer when I was in the hospital, my best friend who I met on the bus, him and his girlfriend drove up from the coast twice while I was in the hospital to just spend the weekend with me, sitting in a hospital. He hates hospitals. They're his least favorite place in the world, but he came and he sat and he did puzzles with me all weekend. Him and his girlfriend.
And those are the greatest people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like, it was just that little gesture of just like literally physically being there in person made this just phenomenal difference.
Yeah.
It made all the difference in the world, honestly. And I don't think I really understood the value of that. Of just being able to be like, I need a hug. Even things like that. It goes a long way. It really does.
There are a lot of different ways to help people that like you love, and it's not necessarily giving them advice or listening to them or just being there. But it's like a mixture of all of them, depending on like what kind of person it is. Like I know, like there's some people that I know that they're like, I just need to talk.
Yeah.
Some people are like, I just need to talk. And then some people are like, I just need you to talk.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'll listen. I'll talk if you need me to. I'll, like, whatever you need, I'll be there.
I'll sit here silently while we watch a movie, like anything, really.
I have friends that have, like, slept over. We'll sleep on, like, opposite sides of the bed, but they're just like, I just need someone. Like, it's just nice to not be alone sometimes. Yeah.
I just need you to be physically just there.
Yeah. It's like, I just don't want to sleep alone tonight again. It's like, okay, just like come sleep over. We'll just like hang out.
Yeah.
Watch a surfing video.
Yep.
And just lay there.
Yeah.
And just like talk a little bit, have some pillow talk, and then just like, all right, good night.
Okay, now I'm asleep.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's like, I'll wake up in the morning, I'll make you breakfast. But like, yeah, no, those are like the greatest friends that you don't have to worry about attributing to some social norm of like having sex or anything, but it's like, I just want you to be there.
Yeah.
I just want someone to be there physically, someone to be there to listen, someone to be there to talk.
Yeah.
And like understanding that each person has like a different criteria that they need met. And sometimes it's like really hard to find that criteria.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're like, I don't know what you need.
Well, it's especially hard because the automatic response for most people is they want to give advice. They want to fix the problem. They want to solve it.
Right.
They want to be like, hey, here's what you should do because this is what I would do.
Yeah.
But the majority of the time, people aren't looking for advice. That's the last thing that they need because they've thought of every possible solution already.
Yeah,
the
like,
majority of the time, they just want you to be there and like they don't want you to hear what they're saying. They want you to hear the emotion behind it. They want you to say, hey, that sounds really hard. It sounds like you're really hurting right now. I'm here for you. I'm sorry this is happening. I love you. One of those things where it's like, this is what I need. I need this reassurance and I need this connection. I don't need you to tell me that I have to go to the bank tomorrow to solve this issue. Like,
oh my God, absolutely.
I need you to say, hey, like, that sounds really stressful.
Yeah. I'm honestly bad at that. I'm like a very rational person that I'm like, life is going to be okay. Life's going to be fine. So I'll like tell people that and kind of like talk to them about it. But it's like, I've gotten better at being like, just talk. Just talk, and like you'll figure out what you need. Like I feel like everyone knows. Like you know that you know that you know, and once you know, you must do. But like you just have to like understand that you know, you probably know what's going on.
Yeah.
You probably know how to do things, what to do, and once you do that thing, it's like okay, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
But you just have to like understand that you know.
Yeah.
And like I'm getting a little bit better at that of being like okay, like. I don't need to be like super philosophical Josh all the time. I can just listen for a little bit and just be there to like listen to you and talk.
Yeah. And I think like it's really hard to get to that place where like you're able to be like, oh, I need to take a step back and just listen. Because I think that we are taught, especially males, like they are taught they need to fix everything.
Yeah.
They're taught that, like, oh, there's a problem, you solve it.
Fixers,
I'm going to be a caretaker in the sense that I will fix it.
Yeah.
It's hard to unlearn that. It's hard to unlearn so many of the things that we're taught that just aren't as effective as we think they're going to be. It's not that people are taught these things because we want them to fail in this situation. Like, we're not taught this because we think people don't... I don't know how to explain what I'm saying, but, like... It's not taught with malintent. Mm-hmm. It's taught because that's just how it's always been.
Yeah.
And, like, I think it's slowly getting to a point where we're moving away from that and we're able to acknowledge emotions as they are and that everyone has them and that they need to be acknowledged and validated. But I think that it's a really big learning curve for everyone to be able to be like, oh, you're having an emotion and I need to, like, take a step back and not freak out and be comfortable with the fact that this is your emotion and I'm witnessing it and I don't need to fix it. And I know I also used to be really, really bad. I was like a major fixer because I wanted to help everyone all the time and like I could listen, but then I'd be like, but have you tried this? Like, and people don't want that. And so I I think the first step for me was asking, what do you need from me right now? What do you want from me in this situation? Would you like me to just sit back and listen, or would you like me to come up with a solution? Would you like me to be giving you any sort of advice? Do you need advice right now? Or do you want me to just sit here, shut up, listen? I can do that too. And then, like, depending on their response, like, that's how I would proceed. And, like, for me, it started out that way, and then it kind of got easier to determine whether or not someone wanted
Right.
any sort of interventions to be presented to them, because over time, you kind of learn people almost never want advice. Almost never. And when they do, they usually ask for it.
Yeah.
They'll specifically ask for advice if they need it or if they want it.
Yeah, totally.
But it took me a really long time to learn that. And to unlearn that sort of automatic fix-it mentality. Because you don't want someone else to be in pain. So it's very, very difficult to sit with someone else's pain. And to sit with their hurt. And to sit with their big, scary emotions. Especially the sadness. Especially the anger. Especially the hurt and the grief. Those are terrifying. Because we know how uncomfortable they are for ourselves. And we don't want anyone else to be feeling that way. That's that empathy and compassion component of just being human. We want to take that pain and we want to make it go away for them. But you can't take it away, and you can't make it go away without sitting with it and processing it and acknowledging it and just validating it and letting it be what it is and letting them feel it and move through it and process it them just on their own. With you there sometimes. Maybe you start the process, but for the most part, you can't take it away. And I think it's really hard to sit with that and to learn to sit with that. And like, we sit with our own emotions sometimes, but people have difficulty sitting with their own emotions. So then sitting with someone else's, it's scary. We're taught not to. I'm not really sure why, because it hasn't been very effective. So hopefully that's something that we're going to learn how to do as we move forward.
It's okay to not be okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was, like, beautiful. That was so good. That was amazing. Yeah, like, full circle, just, like, finish off that. I think that comes, like, really heavily into, like, the depression thing that we talked about at the beginning, that it's okay to just, like, listen to someone. And being, like, in a depressed state, someone's not going to fix you by one conversation. Being anxious, someone's not going to fix you by telling you to be okay. But by listening to people, you can really help. You can really help those people just by listening to them about their anxieties and their depressions, their sadness. That's something you can do that you're like, okay, I feel a little bit better now. I got a little bit off my chest. Now I can accept that, and that's not bouncing around in my head anymore. Now that it's out in the open, it's out in the air, I can talk about it more and more and more, and then it goes away after a while.
And the other thing is, like, once it's out there and someone doesn't tell you, hey, you're crazy, when they sit there and they're like, hey, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
I get that this is how you're feeling right now. And I understand, or I've been there, or I can see where you're coming from. You're not crazy. That is one of those big components of taking that and just shrinking it down just a tiny little bit.
Yeah.
Because it takes out that extra anxiety of thinking, I'm crazy for thinking this.
Yeah, absolutely.
That once that anxiety is gone, then you can actually look at the situation that you are feeling anxious about and be a little more objective.
Yeah.
A little more accepting. And it doesn't seem quite so scary.
Right, yeah, no, 100%. That was beautiful. That was so good. I think, are you good there?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. Okay, come here, give me a hug.